and welcome to the Times of India. You're watching Global Pulse with me, Neha Khanna. The world is closely watching the diplomatic drama that's unfolding in Geneva, Switzerland. The stakes couldn't be higher as US and Ukrainian officials continue their meetings under intense pressure to hammer out a peace agreement that could end the war with Russia. At the heart of the talks is a controversial US-backed peace plan, which is being revised to some extent after fierce criticism. The blueprint has drawn bipartisan fire in Washington because it appears to concede too much to Moscow. Under its current draft, Kiev would be pressured to cede territory, shrink its military, and renounce any prospect of joining NATO in exchange for a cessation of hostilities. These demands mirror long-standing Kremlin red lines. Leading the US delegation is Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who emerged from intensive discussions in Geneva over the weekend, projecting cautious optimism. Rubio called the meeting very meaningful, adding, "It's perhaps the best meeting and day we've had so far in this entire process." That's how he put it. He said that despite the criticism, the parties are making a tremendous amount of progress, especially on the most contentious items.
All right, we had a very good day today. I think we made a tremendous amount of progress, even from the last time I spoke to you, and I apologize for keeping you waiting, but there was more work to be done. Now, obviously, like any final agreement, they'll have to be agreed upon by the presidents, and there are a couple issues that we need to continue to work on. But I think the report today is that I think today was worthwhile. It was it is probably the most productive day we have had on this issue. Maybe in the entirety of our engagement, but certainly in a very long time.
Trump had the attitude of the Ukrainians during these negotiations.
Oh, it was very positive. I'm telling you, today was the most productive day we have had.
He said they were ungrateful earlier.
Well, today, and we've talked to him since, I think he's quite pleased at the reports we've given him about the amount of progress that's been made. Well, obviously the Russians get a vote here, right? So, I mean, look, we began from the early stage of this process with our understanding of the Russian position as had been communicated to us in numerous ways. At the State Department, we received numerous written non-papers and things of this nature. Also verbally, things they discussed over time and so forth. So it was, no matter what we came up with today, obviously we now have to take what we come up with, if we can reach that agreement with the Ukrainian side, to the Russian side. That's another part of this equation. They have to agree to this.
But the contents of Trump's 28-point peace plan have raised alarm bells both in Kiev and among European allies. The original version asked Ukraine to hand over parts of the Donbas region, which Russia has not even captured, limit the size of its armed forces, and commit to never joining NATO. Many see this not just as a compromise, but a capitulation, effectively rewarding Russia for its aggression. Critics argue that such terms undermine Ukraine's sovereignty and set a dangerous precedent for European security. Complicating matters is mounting public pressure from US President Donald Trump, who has made clear he expects a deal, and soon. Just hours ahead of the latest round of talks in Geneva, Trump took to Truth Social, his social media platform, sharply criticizing Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky despite the diplomatic push that's underway. He wrote, "Ukraine leadership has expressed zero gratitude for our efforts, and Europe continues to buy oil from Russia." This post has brought back memories of the fiery and rather nasty exchange between Trump and his Vice President J.D. Vance on the one hand and Zelensky on the other that took place in the Oval Office earlier this year. Vance asked Zelensky before the world media if he had thanked the United States even once for its help and support in its war efforts against Russia. Meanwhile, Trump has also set a deadline for this Thursday for Ukraine to sign off on the peace proposal. But in a twist, he qualified his statement, adding that the current draft is not his final offer, implying that he is willing to renegotiate. And in even more provocative language, he said if Kiev refuses, he would allow President Zelensky to fight his little heart out. On the Ukrainian side, the mood is cautious. President Zelensky has once again publicly expressed gratitude for US support, especially the military aid. He said Ukraine is grateful personally to President Trump for the assistance, starting with the javelins that have been saving Ukrainian lives. But he has also made clear that any peace deal must not reward Russia for unleashing war. Zelensky said the crux of the entire diplomatic situation is that it was Russia and only Russia that started this war. To stop Russia's war and prevent it from ever igniting again, peace must be dignified.
Сьогодні день багатьох зустрічей і перемовин. Фактично від ранку дзвінки, наради, консультації. Українська делегація в Женеві вже провела ряд зустрічей з американською стороною. Також з нашими європейськими партнерами. Зараз була доповідь делегації за підсумками розмов. І це були ґрунтовні розмови, багато змінюється, дуже уважно ми працюємо над кроками, які потрібні для закінчення війни.
Zelensky's chief of staff, Andrei Yermak, called the session in Geneva very productive and thanked the US for its commitment to bringing peace. So what's really at stake in Geneva? For Washington, there's a clear sense of urgency. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that the differences are not insurmountable, but time is limited. For Trump, the pressure is public and personal. He has publicly chided Kiev, set a deadline, but simultaneously implied flexibility by saying it's not his final offer. For Ukraine, accepting significant concessions would be politically risky. Ceding parts of Donbass or limiting military capability could undercut its sovereignty and security. On the flip side, rejecting the deal could mean continued war or even a reduction in US support, which, according to some reports, Washington has threatened. But what about Russia? Even if Kiev tentatively agrees, the deal may no longer work for Moscow. It has repeatedly insisted on maximalist demands, and any dilution could be unacceptable to President Putin. At this critical juncture, three broad scenarios emerge. One, a breakthrough deal. Kiev and Washington hammer out acceptable terms, possibly revising the 28-point framework to better protect Ukrainian sovereignty while still giving Russia something, and then a ceasefire is declared. Two, a revised but weakened deal. Ukraine makes serious concessions, but only after guarantees and safeguards are strengthened, particularly around security and verification mechanisms. This would likely please the US and Russia more than Europe, leading to further tensions. And three, a breakdown. Talks fail, Kiev rejects the framework, and Washington could pull back or reimpose pressure. Trump's threat to withdraw support to Ukraine looms large, as does the risk of renewed fighting on the ground. The Geneva talks are both historic and dangerously fragile. On the one hand, both sides are signaling a willingness to negotiate. Marco Rubio's optimism and Zelensky's cautious but open posture suggest the possibility of a deal. But on the other hand, the fears in Kiev and the rest of Europe, loss of territory, loss of autonomy, and emboldening of Moscow are real. The question is, will the Geneva negotiations lead to a lasting peace or collapse under the weight of demands and distrust? The outcome could shape not just Ukraine's future, but also the broader architecture of European security for years to come.